Okay, here's my process for cleaning up metal. To get it prepped for powder coating, I use mild steel, so I put it in muriatic acid, soak it for about 20 minutes, or the longer you soak it, the better job it does. Takes all the mill scale off, and it also loosens up the dross if you're using CNC plasma. Makes it so it comes off real easy. So I take this all out, and then I go rinse it off. For the rinse, you don't need to do too much, just get all the stuff off. And then after I'm done rinsing it, I'm going to take it over to the grinder. I'm going to knock off the little bits of dross that are on there. Alright, now that I got it rinsed off, get the dross side. I got a magnetic chuck, helps hold it still while I'm removing the dross. That chuck, and then what I use is a wire wheel brush on an angle grinder. This thing makes quick work of dross. So let me get it going for you. Get my eye protection on. I'll show you what it does. Okay, after removing the dross, metal's clean, no oils or anything nasty on it. I take it to my sandblaster. So that's my blast cabinet. I've removed the grate in there, it gives me more room to work with. I use a minimal amount of sand in there at any given time. What I found out is if you fill it up, it doesn't flow as well and it gets clogged off, and you don't need all that in there. So I just put as much as I need to get the job done in there. And I have an aftermarket valve, metering valve, I guess what they call it, on this. It's a Harbor Freight cabinet. And I also have a aftermarket sandblasting gun. I'm using just 70 grit black oxide. Works good. I run my cabinet to a vacuum, so I get negative pressure in there. It sucks all the dust out as you work, but leaves the sand behind. And yeah, I'll shoot it with that, and I'll move on to the next step. After sandblasting, I get my hooks ready. These are the hooks that I use for hanging my items in the oven when I powder coat them, when I spray them. So what I do is I clean up the hooks, get the last coat of powder off them, so I get down to bare metal. That way I get a good ground. If you don't clean them up, they can work, but you won't get as good results as if you clean them up. So I do it every time. That way I've always got a fresh hook with a good ground. And then I'll show you the next step. Okay, now that I got my hooks ready, I'm gonna put on a fresh pair of gloves, because anytime you touch something that's about to be powder coated, that's been cleaned or sandblasted, you shouldn't touch it with bare hands because you get your oils on it. It's clean right now, so it's ready to go, besides just blowing it off. Now, with my metal, I'm using mild steel that's freshly milled, and I cut it on my plasma table, and it's a little different than a lot of other stuff that people would powder coat. If you were to be doing like a car part that's been greasy and, you know, it's been exposed to the elements, you don't treat it like I do, where you put it in a muriatic acid bath to remove the mill scale. a lot of the times it already has powder coat on it, and you would strip it like in Benco B17. Really nasty stuff, takes all the powder off, and then they give it a phosphate rinse. And after that, they take it and do what they call as outgassing. You'll put it in an oven, and the oven will be heated to about 50 degrees more than what you would cure the powder out. So if it's supposed to be 400 cure schedule for 10 minutes or whatever, you put it in there at 450 and let it sit in there until, you know, like a good hour or so. And that's outgassing. What that does is it brings all the nasty stuff that's absorbed into the metal out to the surface, such as greases, grimes, and all sorts of crap comes out to the surface. Then you take it and you sandblast it. So that's the difference between what I'm doing and the other typical parts. So, but if you're doing what I'm doing, then that's the way you do it. So this is clean. So for this one, I only blasted the back because on this one, I'm gonna be doing some stud welds. And I'll show you that in a minute. But for the other parts, I sandblasted both sides, and what you wanna do is as soon as you get them out of the oven, out of the blast cabinet, I get them on my hooks and I go hang them somewhere where they're not gonna be touched by anything else. I'm not laying them on a dirty surface. So that way they don't get contaminated. So I know they haven't been contaminated. So I'm gonna put it like this, and then I'm gonna go hang it on a wire. That way nothing touches it and nothing gets on it. Okay, so for this particular item, I'm gonna do some stud welds. This is a multi-layer sign, and so the way I do multi-layered signs is I use stud welds. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. That's the way I do it. Anyways, my backing layer, the first layer, whatever you want to call it, I put holes in it where the studs are gonna go. And I take the top layer, I put it directly on top of the item that it's gonna go over, line it up real good, make sure it looks good all around. And I hold it and I flip it and I mark the back side of this through the holes with the permanent marker. That way I know exactly where my studs need to go. You could also flip it like this, clamp it together, and then instead of marking it, just do the studs directly into the holes onto the top layer. But I've found that when you do that, sometimes the layers can stick to each other and make marks when you separate them. So I don't like to do it that way. This is the way I do it. But I'll show you how I do the stud welds in a second here. Okay, so I've made my marks. I flipped it and I put just a little teeny dot dead center in the middle of the holes where the studs need to go. So now that I'm done doing that, I still got clean gloves on. I'm gonna hook this and go hang it and then move on to doing some stud welds. Okay, so here's my stud welder. I got mine from this company right there. Hopefully you can see that. Turn this guy on. So it's a True Weld, a TWI 250. Really simple. It's got a gun, comes with it. There's a ground clamp. And I just select what type of stud I'm gonna use. I'm gonna be using some number 8s. So if you change it, you can see it flips to different powers, different settings. So that's a number 8 right there. This is a capacitive discharge stud welder. It's just regular plug, nothing special, no special power requirement. I'll show you how I do this. All right, here are the studs. These are some number 8s. These ones are, I forget what they call them. They're postless or whatever. See, it doesn't have the this little thing here. Makes it a little easier to work with on smaller items. I'll just load that up in there. Let me go get my flashlight here. I like to shine a light like this on there because it helps me see my dot as I'm putting the stud welder down. And so the reason I do mine on top of a piece of cardboard or paper is, one, keeps it clean. Although I'm still gonna sandblast the other side. I don't want to get it all nasty because I don't want to get my cabinet nasty. So I put this down to keep it clean, and the other reason is because when I go to do the stud weld, if it's directly on top of the metal and the ground's on the metal, then this can stick to the table and leave some imperfections on my item that you can end up seeing in the final product. So that's why I do it on top of this. I got a mark right there. I just line up the stud directly on top of my dot. The flashlight helps a lot with that. Make sure not to move it, get nice and flat. Pop. There she is. And these leave no marks on the front, and they're really strong too. Just full penetration welds with 0 marks on the front. A lot of other people will take just regular bolts, and they'll put the bolt on top of their mark and use things to hold it in place, because when you TIG weld it or you weld it, it can move. So they put things on it and then TIG weld it, but you always get imperfections in the front with the TIG welder unless you're some kind of master, I guess. But when I used to do it that way, I'd always get marks on the front. So that's the process for doing the stud welds. And after I'm doing these studs, I'm gonna put it back in the blast cabinet again, get rid of this nastiness here, and then do the front, and then everything's ready to powder coat. Alright, so I'm about to do my powder coating. I'm going to show you what equipment I have. I have a knockoff JMA with a, I forgot what they call that. Anyways, I'll remember it later. Some type of ring helps with the multi-layers. But that's my unit right there. There's my compressor. I'm running a motor guard filter. You can see that down there. Sorry about the mess. And I have tsunami filter. So that's my water and oil separator. It goes through that first, and then it goes to the motor guard. So between those two filters, I get bone dry air, clean air. And I do my powder in my garage unless it's nasty. I mean, if it's nasty outside, if it's nice and clear day, I'll do it outside because I don't like to make the mess in here. I do have 2 filters running. I spray them right in front of it, but even then, it still makes kind of a mess. So between these 2 guys, they get most of the powder. This is just a household filter on the box fan. It sucks the air in. So, and then this is a HEPA filter sheets I bought off of Amazon. I just put it all around this guy and taped it up, and between these 2 fans, they suck up most of all the mess, but it still makes a little bit of a mess. And then I also have a whole room filter up here. This thing does the rest, but even then, between all that, I still get a mess in here. So with powder coating, I start with my lightest colors. Today I'm doing a white, a maroon red, and a blue. So I'll do the white first, I'll do the blue next, and the red. I always go from lightest to darkest, regardless of whether I'm doing one part with multicolors or a bunch of different parts that are single stage colors. So it's just a good practice. I'm gonna clean out my gun. I use a vacuum. I suck the front, suck the back, and then I take it apart and I blow it with compressed air to get it all cleaned up. I'll show you that in a second. All right, so I just put the vacuum hose right in there. Take most of the powder out. Then here. Take the tip off. Can't remember what it's called. It's a Corona ring. They help with applying multi-stage. If you're doing like three layers on one item, it helps a lot. But anyways, now after I vacuumed everything, I get my compressed air and I blow these guys out towards the filters. Get it a few times. Now the gun, get it to the back. And I do through the tip here. Do a couple times. My Corona. clean off this part. Try not to touch the item unless you got perfectly clean gloves on. Back. Front one more time. All right, now I'm ready to lay some powder. Okay, I forgot to show you guys what I'm using for, this is a cup hopper I use. I'm gonna clean it out the same way I did with the gun. I'm gonna vacuum it and then I'm gonna blow it. But this is what I use. A lot of people use a box feed, or they use a larger external hopper that's not connected to the gun with hoses. This makes color change outs super fast, and it's really convenient. It's not that great of a thing if you're doing like rims and you got 4 rims to do. You'd be refilling this thing numerous times throughout your powder coating process. But for small items like this, these are great. And then I just take it off, and it attaches directly to the bottom here. I just screw it in, and it's really a breeze to do color changes. So that's what I use. So these are my settings that I'm using for flat panel single stage coat. This works pretty good for my little cup hopper. If the cloud's not right, you know, I'll adjust it at the gun. If I need to, I'll come over here and adjust this one. I keep the KV and the microamps, or whatever they call it, at 100, both of them, for a single stage first coat. If I'm doing a second coat, then I'll move it over to these settings, and it changes it. For my gun, it automatically adjusts the microamps, or I might have that backwards, but it automatically adjusts one of the numbers based off of feedback from the gun. So not all of them are like that. You may have to play with your settings, but that's what I use. And then if it's a really tight, if I'm doing like a 3rd or 4th coat, I'll have these. I think it's the KV that adjusts it based off of the microamps. So it says it's 100, but that will change based off of the bottom setting for me. If you're not using this type of a setup, then you have to fine-tune the KV or adjust the KV. So, but that's what I'm going to use for just a single stage coat. So I start by doing the back of the item first. I spray it about 9 to 12 inches away from the piece. I always start near the hook, because for us metal art guys, that's our Faraday area. That's where the powder will have issues of not sticking. So you want to start there and then move away from it. So I'll get going here. Okay. For me, it's not a rocket science. I just lay down the powder until it's a nice even coat and I can't see the substrate. You definitely don't want to see the metal underneath it. If you see the metal underneath it, you obviously don't have enough on there. If you apply too much, then you'll start getting a uneven look to it. It'll look clumpy in areas, and so I hit it until it's nice and even and I can't see anything under it. So I'll flip it around, do the front. Start from the hook. And that's that. I'll put that in the oven. Wherever you order your powder from, you're going to want to look at their data sheet. It will tell you the temperature and the cure time. So, for instance, if it says 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes, what that means is I need to put this in the oven, and I need to make sure the metal gets up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit before I start the clock. So for thicker items, you need to use an infrared thermometer. For this stuff, when I open the oven, it's going to lose about 50 degrees temperature. So if it needs to be 400, it will probably drop down to 350 when I put the item in there. By the time the oven gets up to 400 degrees, I know this thin of metal is going to be right around the same. It will be 400 degrees. So I usually don't use a thermometer on small things like this. This is 14 gauge metal. By the time my oven gets back up to temperature, this item is also at that temperature, and I'll just start the clock 10 minutes from there. So, but if it's thicker, you do need to measure it. If I do a thicker part, some uneven surfaces, this is just flat metal, I know it's going to be at that temperature. I've done it before, I've tested it. It's by the time the oven's there, this item's there, and I'll start the clock 10 minutes. Once 10 minutes is up, I'll pull it out of the oven and hang it on the rack and let it get cool, and that's that. All right, so here's my oven. It's got 2 heating coils at the bottom. I'm not going to really take time to show you. It has a PID temperature control on there, and there's a fan, so the air circulates in there, and it's a pretty accurate temperature. I'm going to plop this in here. Try to get in there as fast as I can. Bam. Now, see, we'll bring this up to 400, but by the time this oven gets up to 400, that metal part will be the same temperature as the oven. So I don't open it and hit it with the thermometer to see what temperature it's at. The infrared thermometer, I know. So once it gets to 400, I'll start my time at 10 minutes, and then I grab a pair of pliers and I grab that hook and I pull it out and put it on a rack somewhere else, and then move on to the next part. I usually fill the whole oven up. I'll put as much items as I can in there, so I'm not wasting a cycle and all this energy just to do one part. But for this video, I'm just doing one at a time. And here's the final product.